welcome to the Saturday edition of Detroit in Black and White. We're doing it virtually today because normally do it out of the Guardian building, and it's the Jazz Festival this weekend, which I recommend everyone check out. But it's a little crazy since the Guardian building is right down there. But we've got two of us who are a little light today. We've got Jim Nardone, the former police chief of Trenton. I'm Allan Lengel from Deadline Detroit. We are missing Adolph Mongo and Vanessa Moss, but we'll try to carry on without them for today. Welcome to the Labor Day weekend. Jim, do you want to start off? Is there anything you'd like to talk about? Or
there's lots to talk about. What that means is it's just the two of us. We need more interaction from our colleagues out there that are commenting. So the first thing I want to talk about, if I may, is there's a guy named Robert Lee Rogers from Pontiac. I don't know if anybody's heard this story. Mr. Rogers, I'll call him Mr. Rogers, decided earlier this week, he got in an argument with his girlfriend, and he decided to take a shot at her and her 2-year-old. I don't know who's familiar with this story, but he was came before he was arrested on a domestic violence charge, went in front of judge, and I'm going to say her name about 10 times because everybody should hear it. Her name is Angelina Marie Thomas Scruggs. And he was charged with 5 felonies for this shooting. And the judge decided that he would get a $1,000 PR bond. So he was immediately released. Well, what that brings to light is Latricia Green was killed a week ago in Detroit. That had a record of the same kind of domestic violence. And the judge, again, Angelina Marie Thomas Scruggs, decided that he should not be jailed. He shot at her and hit her car. She was with her 2-year-old son. So I don't know what's going on with the criminal justice system. Apparently, the family wrote a letter to Mike Bouchard, who was Oakland County Sheriff, and he said, I don't know what to tell you. It was the judge. So it's awful.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I want to bring up on a positive note, City Council member Gabriela Santiago Romero, who's running for re-election, I believe in District 6 in Southwest Detroit, there's a story come out in Bridge, Detroit, saying that she rejected a $5,000 campaign contribution earlier this year from Dan Gilbert's PAC, Political Action Committee, which includes, employees and Dan Gilbert. Which is incredibly commendable. And she was one of the council members who voted against him getting a tax break. I believe it was a $60 million tax break in the Hudson's building. And so, it's clearly a way for Dan Gilbert to try to ingratiate himself, to try to get, any impediments out of the way for any future developments. We see Mary Sheffield's gotten a lot of money from the Gilbert PAC. We've seen other people in the past. We saw Letitia Johnson, who was running in 2021. Now she's running unopposed this year, where she had railed against the billionaire ruling class, and she was taking money from Gilbert. So what do you think, Jim? Does it matter? Do you think that donation money matters if you take $5,000 when the vote comes up? Does it impact people?
I think it should matter, and I think people should know about it. Unfortunately, it's not being covered today by the Detroit News or the Free Press or any of the TV channels, right? I had not heard that. Yeah. So a politician with character, that's unusual, isn't it? Don't you think that's unusual?
Well, I say certainly. It's interesting. When I was at the Detroit News in the Lansing Bureau, when I got up there, and that was 1985, I was super skeptical. We just think of always politicians as kind of scumbags and compromise and all that. And I have to say, in my 3 years in the State Capitol Bureau there, I gained a lot of respect for a lot of different politicians there. I thought there were some really, really decent, honest politicians. When I went to the Washington Post, I decided to be more open-minded about the Congress and all that, and I left extremely skeptical. I thought there were a lot of very compromised people who took a lot of donations, were wined and dined by lobbyists, were influenced by just a lot of bullshit, and I lost a lot of respect for people I thought I had respect for, and so I think it's a mixed bag. But here in Detroit, we have council members. We've had some very good, decent council members, but we've also had some who have gone to prison, and we've had some who should have went. Gabe Leland should have went to prison. He ended up getting probation. He was originally charged in federal court with bribery, and it ended up being shifted. He had a great attorney, Steve Fishman, one of the best criminal defense attorneys. Fishman was able to get it moved over to state court as a campaign violation and as probation. But I think, the other thing that, and I like Coleman Young the second. He when he termed out of the Senate, he came over to Deadline Detroit for a little bit, and we were doing podcasts with him and stuff. And he's a great guy, but he's got his mother as his chief of staff, and I'm sure she's very competent, but it looks wrong. It's just a bad look. And in politics, optics matter. That's why we have conflicts of interest. It doesn't matter. It was like Clarence Thomas, the Justice Thomas, whose wife, Ginny Thomas, who's a big advocate in the MAGA world, and he refused to recuse himself in any of the votes, saying, well, we don't discuss it. Well, I'm sorry, you're living together, whether you're sleeping in the same bed or whatever the arrangement is, doesn't matter. You're married, you're living under the same house. I don't care. We're not going to monitor every conversation. It just looks bad. You need to use yourself. So
absolutely a bad look. Can we say hello to our friends out there?
Go ahead.
Good morning, Derek Henry, Janet Overall. Good morning. We missed you last night, too. We apologize for what happened last night. We hope it doesn't happen again. It's the first show we missed on a Friday, and it's disappointing, but we had to work through a couple of things last night. Dorian, good morning. We're rocking with you, too, Dorian. Thanks for all your contributions. And Janet Overall, thanks for sharing. Activist judge may have had a grudge against the plaintiff. Pontiac is a small town, could easily be that. It's a 50th district. So I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but people that shoot at cars and little kids should not be out on the streets, if you ask me, at least not the next day. Good morning to our friend Karen Winston, Jill Sheridan. Hi, Jill. Kenneth Reed, our old buddy, going way back. Good morning to you. Janet says good morning to Karen. She is taking money from Gilbert to keep the Republican business class continued participation in downtown. She will be the female version of Duggan. I expect Dorian's talking about mayoral candidate Mary Sheffield.
And so another issue, and I can't remember if we talked about it on the show or not, but the Detroit News is, I think we did the other time, but I'm curious what viewers think about this. In the 5th district council race, which is Mary Sheffield is the representative right now, but she's running as mayor instead of for re-election there. We've got two candidates, Willie Burton, who we've had on the show, and his opponent is Renata Miller, a retired Chrysler worker, UAW member, and has gotten the endorsement of the UAW. And so the question becomes, does character and something that happened 20 years ago matter? In 2004, Miller was found guilty in Oakland County Circuit Court of domestic violence, which was a misdemeanor. During a preliminary exam, a married man who was having an affair with Miller alleged that she assaulted him outside his Oak Park home in 2003, the day after he broke up with her. She also allegedly smashed a car window out with a tire iron and threatened him with the tire iron. She got probation. In 2001, she filed for Chapter 13 personal bankruptcy. 2008, the owners of Bloomfield Hills apartment filed a forcible entry and detainer action to regain the property from her after she refused to move out. Does that matter? To me, I look at something like that and I think we're going to see somebody with a lot of drama on, and we've seen in the past, we've seen, Monica Conyers, we've seen, a lot of drama, and the people of Detroit deserve better. They need government that's going to be effective, that's going to be focused, and not getting into personal little things. And I don't know, maybe she's learned and she's matured from there, but you think it matters, Jim?
Well, here's the thing. First of all, we shouldn't be judged by our worst day. As a police officer for almost 28 years, I don't think it's fair to judge people based on their mistakes. I just, nothing's personal. Love is very personal, right? And people do crazy acts all the time when they're involved in a romantic relationship. It's not making excuses, right? If there's an assault, if she assaulted somebody, yeah, she needs to pay the price for that. Is it a one-time event? You're talking about now that she was removed from an apartment, that she was, she assaulted a man. If there's a string of incidents, different situation. It shows a lifestyle issue. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I get it. Love can be very emotional and people become very vulnerable, and it's crazy things happen. But we've all had romantic relationships that have ended, sometimes not in our favor, and and that's where we're tested. Really, is when in our worst. Sometimes in our lowest moments, it's not in our best moments how we do, but it's really in our worst moments and our most challenging times. It's like how we react. And so you're right. One time, a one-off maybe, but when there's a pattern there, look, Willie Burton was evicted from his apartments, Lafayette, one of the Lafayettes over there, and look, people get into personal things. Not everybody either has the money or handles their money the right way. I mean, we see that even, the wealthiest people in Hollywood, and we see the wealthiest athletes who make tremendous amounts of money and they end up bankrupt because they don't know how to handle their money. So not everybody's that well versed in, financial.
And some end up in domestic violence situations too, like the rest of society, right?
Right.
Good morning, MR1213. Again, we missed you too last night. Sorry about that. Karen Winston says, indeed, Dorian, when the money takes precedent over the let me slow down here, over the issues, and it's all about campaigning for donor dollars, makes it all a joke. Democracy is dead. Jill says she thought she was crazy. No, you're not crazy, Jill. We're sorry that we weren't on purpose. Our friend On Purpose, thanks for tuning in. Our colleague Eric Brown says On Purpose is spot on. On purpose, exactly. And I'm missing his statement. Here it is. The problem, I think this is it. The problem that is not being realized is that the oligarchs run America and not the people. I think that's what everybody's responding to. And it sure seems that that the United States is becoming, well, maybe not becoming, maybe you see similarities between Russia and the United States. They're becoming more similar instead of more different, I think.
I have a video from, Trump had a 3-hour cabinet meeting and people were around the cabinet. It was like out of what you would see in Russia or China or North Korea. Here, I'll play it. It's about a minute.
I was going to try to describe for you just how sycophantic this cabinet meeting today was. How much it would make North Korean leader like Kim Jong-un or Russian President Putin blush.
As we approach Labor Day weekend here, this is just such a great opportunity really to recognize your leadership as a true champion for working people.
Everyone knows there's no stronger advocate for hardworking American families than you, sir.
Mr. President, it's pretty great to celebrate Labor Day with a builder who loves labor.
Mr. President, I invite you to see your big, beautiful face on a banner in front of the Department of Labor, because you are really the transformational president of the American worker.
The average family and individual that lives in this country is safer than they've been in years because of what you've done.
Our country has never been so secure thanks to you.
You have breathed life back into the profession of law enforcement.
Your tireless campaign and your relentless messaging made people realize the American dream isn't dead.
Look, I mean, it's just hard to see that publicly, a public display of, as somebody, one of the commenters said, bootlickers. It shouldn't have to be that way. Trump did that in the first term, and his, what was his name, Mad Dog Medicine or whatever, the Secretary of Defense, he was the only one who everyone else went around and said, Mr. President, you're amazing, and we're so lucky to work for you. He was the only one who refused to do that. And he just said, Mr. President, it's an honor to work for the American people. And that's
should we take a break and then
yeah. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Homeownership opportunities are rising in the city of Detroit, and there's a house out there that's right for you and your family. You don't even have to worry about credit or getting a loan. You can win a house for as little as $1,000 and pay for the renovation cost as you go. It all starts at buildingdetroit.org and the Detroit Land Bank Authority. Our auction and Own It Now programs offer a variety of houses and neighborhoods all over the city of Detroit. These homes are in desperate need of repair and new ownership. You can begin by going to our interactive map and detailed property listings to find the right fit for you. It won't be easy, and renovation costs are not cheap, but our compliance team is there every step of the way. We will help you track your progress and connect you with local discounts to save you more money. We have already sold more than 15,000 homes in the city of Detroit, and our inventory is shrinking fast, so you don't want to miss out on this wonderful opportunity. Start your home buying journey today by visiting buildingdetroit.org. Homeowners.
All right, we are back. So, Jim, what's your thoughts on that little round table?
I have a lot of thoughts. First, hello, Mike Bunch says he's sorry, the oligarchs. Hello, Stephanie Bone. Thank you for the Purple Heart. Bootlickers, you got that. There's always been a time to kiss up to him. There's always been a time to kiss up to him. Nothing new. Jill Sheridan. Janet Overall. I see a figure down there, but I can't really see. It looks like a little woman. Gula Geechee, a rep in South Carolina. We have to get the land in the trust of residents of this country. So much brown nosing and Gilbert and Trump and Doug and our homeboys. This is my evaluation of it. So whenever you take a position, I don't care if it's, if you're writing for the Washington Post or you're a police officer or you're the mayor or you work at General Motors. The goal is to get better, and they're basically telling this guy he's perfect now, right? He doesn't need any improvement. That's a terrible position to take.
Right. When I was at the Washington Post, it was interesting. I'd been there about 11 months, and the managing editor came, and we were just standing around, and he turned to me and he said, so what do you think about our newsroom? And I looked at him, I said, you know what? There's a lot of very ambitious, insecure people here. And he looked at me, he was kind of shocked that that was one of my problems. I was not an ass kisser, and I paid for it at times, at different times at the Detroit News, and I was very active in the union and pushed back when I thought management was doing something wrong. But you don't have to be a rebel, but it's a little bit beyond the dignity of a human being to have to suck up to anyone, regardless if they're your boss or whatever. It shouldn't have to be that way. And some bosses like that. Some bosses hate it. I was a boss that, we had a staff at Deadline Detroit. I never wanted anyone to suck up to me. I would have given them shit had they done that. But they knew they could express themselves to me. But I just find it's just really demeaning to have to do that type of stuff.
Doesn't conflict breed success? Where are these people's self-respect? Mr. Duckett, glad to see you on tonight. The video is a result of Citizens United. Never thought in my 48 years I'd see fascism take control of the government. Had a clue it was coming on January 6th, but we are here. I don't scratch Karen Winston where it don't itch, when it don't itch, nor do I laugh when nothing is funny. Voting matters, Mike Bunch. I believe that the more that vote, the harder it is to cheat. I think that's probably correct. Success doesn't come from everybody agreeing, right? I don't care if you're in a symphony orchestra. If something's wrong, somebody needs to tell somebody, let's fix this, instead of going along with mediocrity. That's a sign of mediocrity when everybody loves the boss, right? When people are afraid to go in and say, look, this is wrong. You need to be doing this a little bit differently. And only a good boss will listen. A bad boss won't listen. A bad boss wants to just run things. And, I worked for a company a long time ago, 40 years ago, and I was in corporate security. And the guys always joked. Ross Perot was the owner of the company, and the guys would go out and put the flag up in the morning, and they would say, "How's everything?" And Ross Perot would walk in and say, "How's everything?" And the security officer always said, "Well, everything's perfect, Mr. Perot." Well, they're at a different level, right? You're hoping that the executives, from a security standpoint, sure, Mr. Perot, everything's perfect,
right?
But from an operational standpoint, you hope that he had men that had the courage to tell him when something wasn't right.
Right. And women.
And women, yes, exactly. Sorry.
No,
Sorry about that.
I'm just kidding. So, yeah,
I was thinking about his executive staff at that time. Sorry.
Yeah, as someone commented and said, it's that behavior is expected by Trump, but it's like you say, I think the difference in the previous administration and his first administration and this administration is that the first one, he got people who had more dignity, who were more confident in what they were doing and would say so and would push back, and they didn't last. This time, he's got people who are less qualified for those positions, including RFK, who's the head of Health and Human Services, who doesn't have a medical background. It's okay to have questions about vaccines or whatever, but this guy has no medical background, and when you have that and you're anti-science and you just have beliefs as opposed to basing it on certain things. Look, when the COVID shot first came out, we had to take a leap of faith because we wanted something. We were so desperate. People were dying. People were being intubated at hospitals. We were scared shitless, and so it was like anything. We've looked at the skepticism about the vaccine. Some of it's based on, they'll say, well, this person had a shot and they died. Well, these people have other diseases that they've died from. It's like, you can take science and you can twist it, and you can take data and you can twist it around and create a narrative. But I think what's going on in some, particularly RFK Jr. doing what he's doing, getting rid of the head of the CDC, who's a medical expert. You don't have to agree with everything, but you certainly, you don't fire the person. He hired her like a month and a half ago, and now he's fired her because he doesn't like, she won't go along with all his anti-vaccine things. So
don't you think the people that he's chosen, and I'd like to talk a little bit about what happened with John Bolton, but don't you think they're figureheads more than leaders in their field? Doesn't it appear to be the case?
It should be, but I agree. RFK should be more of an administrator, and you hire the right people. If you don't have those skills, you hire the right people around you who do. But he's dictating to those people who do have the skills, his thoughts, his beliefs, and it shouldn't work that way. Pete Hegseth in the position as head of Secretary of Defense, I don't think he's qualified. But so when you put people in who aren't qualified, one, you can push them around more because they're not experts in what they should be experts in, and plus they're so grateful that they got a job. Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, Dan Bongino, the deputy director of the FBI. These people aren't qualified to do what they're doing, but if they would at least defer to people who are, you can get away with it. You know, you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. You just have to hire the smartest guys in the room.
And how about Christy
women.
Nell? What is she, the Homeland Security Director in a landlocked state, South Dakota, that has probably a smaller population than the city of Detroit? I guess 650,000 people or something live in South Dakota.
Right.
And I'm not sure there's a lot of Homeland Security issues in South Dakota, but there could be.
Yeah. So here's another interesting subject. This week came out that, and we've heard a lot. I've heard, if you've covered crime, Vincent Smothers, who was a hitman in Detroit, he confessed to 8 actual murders. I think 7 were basically, he was a contract killer. He killed 7 people, I think, on behalf of other dope dealers who asked, to get rid of somebody. And the 8th person, he killed a cop's wife. The cop was never charged. He was a suspect. And I think Vincent Smothers outed him on that, but the cop was having an affair, and the allegation was that the cop wanted his wife dead. Vincent Smothers killed her. I think the cop went into the CVS or something. The wife was waiting in the car. Vincent Smothers killed. The cop was arrested and then released. There wasn't sufficient evidence to charge him. And then he was found hanged in some suburban park, like several months later. But
that's right. I do recall that case.
And here's a picture of Vincent Smothers. So now what happens is Vincent Smothers, who's in the Muskegon Correctional Facility, serving I think it's 52 to 100 years. He got a plea, so he didn't have to he should get mandatory life without parole, but they give him 52 to 100 years. So he has to serve, I think, at least 52 years before he'd be eligible. And he is 44 maybe or something like that. So who knows? He could live in his 90s and he'll get out. But so Smothers they raided his cell, which they sometimes do. They found a phone in there. And so they started going through the phone, and while they were also searching, they found letters and stuff like that. An inmate in another facility in Jackson was communicating with them, and the other guy had been convicted of a shooting. One person died, one person was wounded, and he had the guy who was convicted had a beauty salon in East Point. And this was, I think, around 2006 or whatever. He was convicted. So Smothers is suspected of charging other inmates. Since Smothers isn't getting out, he's suspected of getting money to confess to the murders of people being convicted. Or in this case, he said he was there, he witnessed it, and the guy's defense was self-defense. So Smothers signed an affidavit saying he saw the whole thing, and here's what it was: self-defense. And they were trying to get a new trial, and the Macomb Circuit judge denied the trial and said this is bullshit. So now Smothers has been charged with obstruction of justice, as has the other guy, and they're also looking into other cases where Smothers tried to confess to murders that he didn't commit. And he was getting money, and I think passing it on to family members, trying to help them out. So it's an interesting piece of Detroit history. I mean, Detroit has had some legendary, hitmen. I know when I was at Detroit News, I did stories on best friends who were originally hitmen for other drug gangs. And then there were 4 brothers, the Brown brothers. In the end, only one survived. The rest were killed. And one is in state prison now, serving for murder. But they were out there, and all the dope gangs would pay them whatever, $5,000, $10,000 to get rid of somebody. And they were allegedly, suspected of killing dozens and dozens of people. At some point, they said, screw this. We'll keep killing people, but we're going to get in the dope business. And they did. And they were quite successful, So Detroit has, there's a legacy of some of these guys. When I did the story on the Brown brothers, there were 2 of the Brown brothers they were at a club, and there was a picture of them in fur coats with guns. I think they had like AK-47s or something. And the Detroit News, we had a whole argument whether we should publish the photo to glorify these guys. And so they ended up, I think, cropping out the guns. You know, they just showed the upper part of them in their fur coats and stuff like that. But you know, that the 80s, the late 80s and the 90s was the Wild West, and guys were making big, you know, big money in the city. I don't really have a feel for the dope world these days. I think there's a lot of prescription drugs out there these days that are being sold, you know, opioids and stuff on the streets. Marijuana is, I mean, now marijuana is so easy to get anywhere with the legal dispensaries. I don't know how. I'm sure there's still some, you know, marijuana in the black market, but it's, you know, they've got to sell it cheaper to compete. But now the cannabis business in Michigan is so competitive. It's, you know, originally there was one guy in Walled Lake and one guy here, and now it's like, you know, you go to Madison Heights, Berkeley, wherever. I don't know, in Trenton, are there cannabis dispensaries?
There are not. But what's interesting about Trenton is that Trenton borders Riverview, which has a land preserve, as they like to call it, which is a dump. And the neighboring communities stopped the expansion of the land preserve. So Riverview decided to put their dispensaries, whatever they call them now, they change the name of them every 3 years, but on the border with Trenton and some other communities, so they could, you know, let us know that, because these communities know that because they stopped the expansion of the land preserve, that they were going to get their money somehow other ways, and they were going to put it right in the face of these other communities. So that's what they did. So Riverview is littered the landscape, bordering other communities with marijuana.
I mean, it's become so competitive that I know a Canadian company, I don't know if they pulled out yet, but they are pulling out of Michigan because it's too competitive. I mean, you start seeing now, you see billboards or whatever, and there's like discounts, you know, 2 for 1, or, you know, come in first, you know, joints on us or whatever. It's become a very, I mean, it's, you know, I think people saw that as the new gold rush here. And I was one of the speakers at Benzinga, one of the news organizations, was holding these little conferences on cannabis and educating people on it. And, you know, the problem is there's some local people, you know, local business people trying to get in the business. It's a legitimate business, but you've got these huge investment funds who have gotten into it now, and these huge companies. And in the end, you know, who knows if it's going to be the tobacco companies that end up dominating the field. But, and at the same time, it's interesting, you know, Denver was one of the first states to do legalized recreational pot. And I did a story on this where the Mexican cartels were feeling the pinch because they were growing stuff out in the field.
Family brothers out there kind of cornered
so
the
they started renting. They started getting into the business. They started renting warehouses and doing in-house growing, which I think you can get better cannabis that way, and competing with the legit people. And now I just think, I mean, the marijuana thing. I mean, marijuana became really, when I was in DC, I was covering a lot of that stuff. Marijuana, you know, the crack corners became marijuana corners.
Yes.
But that was before it was legalized. And now it's like, I just can't imagine there's a lot of money on the street. There are also people, you know, it's very regulated. And, you know, in Michigan, I know it's very regulated. If you're a grower, you have to be authorized by the state. You have to have a license to be able to sell to the cannabis dispensaries. And you still see a lot of people who don't have licenses who are growing, you know, out in the farm fields or whatever, and selling to the cannabis companies for cheaper and competing. And some companies have gotten busted for that, but it's, you know.
I want to ask you and our viewers a question. And I want to go through some of the comments. Should we take a break now, or do you want to wait a few minutes?
Well, yeah, let's take a yep. Let's do a commercial. Thanks.
Nearly 30,000 vacant lots all over the city of Detroit are for sale right now. That's right, nearly 30,000 vacant lots are available now, starting at just $100. The lot next to your house or the lot down the street. Make it yours today in just a few simple clicks. Find out if it is available by visiting buildingdetroit.org. At the Detroit Land Bank Authority, side lots are just $100 and neighborhood lots sell for $250. You can apply and pay online today by visiting buildingdetroit.org. And if you don't see the lot you're looking for, call our offices. Our phone number is 313-974-6869. Again, that is 313-974-6869.
Right. Welcome. Are we going to run the commercial there, Teresa? All right, and that's for McShane's. Okay, you still get.
And that was not a marijuana plant growing in the Building Detroit commercial. So I want to just go back to our guests, for our friends, just for a minute, and then I have a question for everybody, if I may. Jill Sheridan says Trump expects it and staff knows it. That's unfortunate, Jill. I think you're probably right. Dorian, cowardly scumbags do this type of shit, Allan. It's always the people amongst us. And Eric, just to put things in perspective, Eric, you're absolutely right. All leaders of people are kowtowed in some way. I'm not an ass kisser and started some of those and have stated as such to those in a position of leadership and in their presence. Dorian Denard, nobody wants to invest in weed dispensaries in Detroit because they'll be robbed for certain. Karen Winston, with the legalization of cannabis, you would think a drop in crime would follow. Downriver's competing. Dorian, with Oakland County has the most weed dispensaries per capita. Yes, if you go up a little further upriver to River Rouge and Ecorse, it looks like a little bit like Las Vegas up there. Hello, good morning, Ira Todd, our DPD legend. Mr. 1213, I wonder if the legalization of cannabis contributed to the rise of unemployment due to occupants not passing the drug test when applying for jobs. That's an interesting question. But I'd like to ask a question, if I may. That's a great question. I'm not sure that they test for marijuana a lot of jobs. I think if you're a truck driver, a bus driver, police officer, firefighter, etc., I'm not sure that they test for marijuana with all these jobs. But I want to ask our viewers and you, Allan, if you needed a bag of weed, would you go to a dispensary, or would you call a friend that you knew for the last 40 years and said, hey, I need a quarter ounce, or I need a half ounce. Can you bring it by? If you're placing a bet on the Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers, the line's probably moving now because of the trade. Would you go to your friend who's a bookie in Southfield or Detroit, or would you go to MGM Grand? I like to ask our viewers that, because I tend to believe if you've known somebody for 40 years that deals a little weed, that you're probably going to call them and say, hey, can you bring a bag by? I got, $100 or $50 instead of walking into the dispensary. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm curious.
I think at this point, most people just, I don't know how many people are selling weed anymore, to be honest. I mean, back in the day, I was never a big smoker, but, back in the day, I mean, everybody knew somebody who had, you'd have a friend who smokes every day and they always had their, weed connection or whatever. But, I mean, nowadays, I don't know how many people are actually selling weed. I think most the dispensaries are everywhere, whether you feel comfortable buying in Detroit at some of the dispensaries, whether you decide to go to the suburbs. Like I say, Madison Heights, you go down John R. There's a bunch of them. Berkeley, you go down 11 Mile Road. There's different cannabis places. It's so easy now. it's not like you can't find. It's not like you have to drive 40 minutes to get to a place. I mean, a lot of people live around the corner from a dispensary. So,
and I think that's true. On Purpose says go to a longtime trusted friend. Gulag says don't smoke Gulagichi, which is cheaper, MR 1213. I guess that's a good question. I have confidence in my trusted longtime friend, Derrick Henry. That's what I'm thinking. You know, I'm not out there looking to buy weed, but if I were, I'd probably call a guy that I've known 30 years and said, hey, Tony, can you bring a bag of weed by? I grew my own weed and I'm calling my homeboy who's been a bookie for years. Why would you go to MGM Grand and place a $100 bet on a football game when you can call a guy that you've known for 30 or 40 years? That's just my question. I'm not sure what the answer is.
I think there are a lot of, I'm sure there's still some bookies out there, and I'm, if that's the way you've been betting, it's funny. Back in the 80s, I was working for Monthly Detroit Magazine. I was doing a story on bookies, and I never used a bookie before. And I'd call friends who I knew had bookies, and I'd say, hey, do you have I told them, I'm doing a story. You have a bookie I could talk to? And one of my friends said, you don't have your own bookie? And I was like, no, I don't have one. And so I tried to get to, and these were legitimate people, lawyers and whatever. And I tried to get to some. So I told one guy I would bet through, he was a lawyer. And I said, look, let me place a couple bets with your bookie, and then maybe I can get to your bookie and he'll talk to me directly. And I remember betting on 3 games. I bet 2 games on the Los Angeles Lakers were in the playoffs. I bet $50. And I can tell you, your life becomes a lot more interesting. The games are a lot more interesting. You have $50. This is back then in the 80s. You have $50 riding on a game. You're into the game. And I bet on the Tigers, and I lost, in just a regular Tigers game during the week. I lost once and I won twice. So I won $100. But none of them would talk to me. And I went to the racetrack. I went to the Cushion and Q pool hall where I knew there were bookies hanging out. I had friends taking me there, and nobody would talk to me. But I think they're still out there. Usually a lot of times you'll see bartenders, bar owners, they're doing booking on the side to make sure they're doing financially well. I knew a couple, as I got older, I knew a couple people in the bar business who were involved in booking and stuff like that. But
Ira makes a couple good points, and I guess this is a little disturbing if it's correct. I get it. Dispensaries are the new liquor stores, and talking about marijuana, I believe I'd rather have a lab test it. I don't know if they lab test it, but I expect that you would have some recourse if you were poisoned, right? Remember in the 70s, and some of our viewers, Dorian Denard, keep Uncle Whiskers out of your business. I like that. Remember the paraquat scare, right? The government was spraying some kind of whatever it was, insecticide or whatever was showing up in some of the marijuana products. And I'm sure that you couldn't do that today because of, is that what it was? An insecticide or a herbicide or something?
Yeah. I mean,
go ahead.
It's funny. I have a friend in from out of town, and him and his wife, and they were at Belle Isle, and they found a joint. And he texts me and says, "Hey, I found a joint at Belle Isle. Do you want?" I go like, "I'm not going to take out." Like I said, I rarely smoke, but it's like, I'm not going to take a joint off the street that I don't know if it's going to be laced with some kind of something. You have to be careful out there. There's just, and like Ira says, you want to go, a dispensary, it's going to be regulated. You're not going to get some shit that's laced with whatever, fentanyl or whatever might be there. But, that's sort of the idea the idea was, the problem was Detroit was so late to the game on the dispensaries. They kept, the churches were pushing against it. There was this whole moral thing of we can't be, same thing with gambling. Oh, we can't be gambling. We don't want to turn into Atlantic City. The gambling thing in Detroit, we have 3 casinos. I don't think it's not like Atlantic City where it's become the industry but it does generate a lot of tax money for the schools, which is helpful. And and the other thing was everybody was going to Windsor to gamble. They were going to whatever, the Caesars casino or whatever it is over there. And so Detroit finally said, hey, we should have our own casinos. Why do we have to have everyone going to there? And the same thing with the dispensaries. Everybody in the suburbs had those. Detroit was losing out. It's a business. It's a revenue generator. And Detroit needs tax money, So
didn't people get more money and they're winning from the numbers, man, or the Michigan lottery? I think that's a question. I'm not sure. That's a great question. Dorian, help us out here. Bookies and number guys still exist. Older players never mess with the casinos or gambling sites. I think that's kind of what I'm thinking too. It seems like when you drive by a marijuana retail outlet, I'll call it a retail outlet, it looks like it looks more like kids, 20 to 35, maybe 40 years old, generally are walking in those places. I'm sure other people are walking in too, but when I drive by, I kind of look because the parking lots are packed. I know that I happened to be in Minnesota. I had driven to Minnesota a few months ago. Coming back in New Buffalo, there were signs everywhere, and when you looked in the parking lot, it was an early morning. It was either a Sunday, I believe it was a Sunday morning, and it looked like they were giving stuff away. There was hundreds of people.
Wow.
It looked like a concert was going on or something. And there were 3 or 4 dispensaries right at that exit, probably the first exit in Michigan coming from the west coming east. So,
well, it's interesting. Somebody mentioned that loan sharking is still a thing, but I think when I think of loan sharking, I think of the credit card companies, some of the rates that they're charging. I mean, the scam that, the credit card companies, it's just crazy. I mean, a lot of people in this country live on credit. They're paying, some people have $25,000, $50,000 in credit card debt. And the best they can do is just pay the interest rate just to stay. And it just keeps compounding and compounding. And people get in so much trouble using those credit cards. And the interest rates are like the cheapest sometimes are like 19%, 25%, which is like, I consider loan sharking. And that's why these credit card companies can afford to write off when people file bankruptcy. They wipe off or they pay, 10 cents on the dollar for their credit card, whatever. And the credit card companies are fine because the banks do a lot of bullshit loan sharking stuff as well. They screw people in interest loans and stuff like that.
Well, let's go back to that for just a second, Alan, if I can ask you a question. I think it was Zara that I guess had talked about Rocket Mortgage and how they charge certain people more for a loan based on the wrong reasons, right? Based on their color or their ethnicity or whatever.
Code or whatever it might be. Yeah.
I had never, that should be illegal. If it's not illegal, it must be illegal, right? I mean, we went through that in Detroit with the insurance rates. Is it based on, what's it based on? What are we based on?
I moved when I came back and I moved to Detroit. This was in 2015. I was paying. I had been paying like $2,000 a year for insurance, and I have a pretty clean record. 2015, I had an accident on the Lodge Freeway. I had a patch of ice. Car went out of control, and that was the only accident I had in many decades.
Decades, right?
And so you move to Detroit, and I'm with State Farm, which I'd had for 30 years. They raised my rent. They threw in like renters insurance or apartment or whatever. They raised my rate to $4,000 a year, and then suddenly a year later, or a year or two later, I'm paying $5,000. So I didn't even notice it. And I had my insurance agent, State Farm in Royal Oak, and I called and I said, "What's going on here? you raised my rate. I said, I haven't had a ticket. I haven't had an accident. They said, oh, well, you had an accident in 2014. I said, but you gave me my policy in 2015 knowing that, and now you're penalizing. They said, oh, we're sorry. We'll change that. And so I said, screw that. I said, you know what? I'm pissed at you guys for doing that. I shopped around. Progressive gave it to me for $2,000 back to 2000, which is a reasonable rate. But people in the city, and I asked the woman at State Farm, I said, why am I paying so much in Detroit? And she said, one, and I was living in a loft near Comerica Park, which had secured indoor parking. And she said, well, you know, a lot of people in Detroit don't have insurance. That's why you're paying more. Because, you know, if you get an accident with somebody. And I said, first of all, I said, you know why people don't have insurance in Detroit? Because it's so expensive. In Southfield, West Bloomfield would not have insurance. A lot of people, if they had to pay the rates they're paying in Detroit. And I said, second of all, what's the difference if I were to live in the suburbs and I'm working downtown, which we had offices downtown? I said, what's the difference? I'm being exposed every day to Detroit drivers. I'm coming to the city every day. Why is it so much? And she didn't have an answer. And I changed to Progressive and got it a lot cheaper. And that's the thing I think people have to remind themselves. When you have car insurance, after a few years, they try to creep up and sneak in stuff. And you have to be not only pay attention, but shop around and go to other places. You just have to make sure that it's a good insurance company. We have the Detroit News did a piece on Cure Auto, which we see a lot of the commercials with Eric Poe, the owner of it, talking to the Detroit Lions and Scooble and all these people. And they had, the story was that they had an inordinate number of complaints for the size of their insurance company in Michigan. There were a lot of people complaining. And one of them was from a guy who had his car stolen. He lived in the suburbs, but he was in Detroit. He had his car stolen in somebody's driveway. And they were doing an investigation and they wanted his phone. They said, we need your cell phone. They want to make sure there were no texts or any plots or anything. And he said, I'm not giving you my phone. And, you know, they finally found the car. It was stolen. It was in New Jersey. It was recovered in New Jersey or whatever. It was just a lot of bullshit. So the insurance companies are doing whatever they can to get away with it without having to pay you. So you have to be really vigilant. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to get an attorney to go after them.
That's unfortunate. I'm going to read a couple more quick comments, if I may. On purpose, said too many chemists working from their home. I think he's talking about chemistry. Most of the illegal gambling takes place at the auto plants that are left. I know millionaire auto workers from being the numbers man. So a lot of that gambling, right? Gambling and narcotics. A lot of things ran through the auto plants at one time because that's where the people were. The tax money didn't help the schools much. MR 1213 on purpose. Casinos drain poor people from their limited funds. I think that's true. They separate the people that can least afford to have to be in a casino, unfortunately. Karen Winston, I don't smoke weed or tobacco, but I know people who do. Most of them will go to the dispensary, but some of them grow their own. So that's interesting, Karen. A little position from a retiree. I'll call her a mature young lady. The young folks are picking up the weed for their grandparents. I like that, Ira. I think that's a great idea. I think they might maybe sneak a little. They have to check that bag and make sure the weight is accurate, right? If they send the young people to get it. Casinos boost the bank accounts of oligarchs, and Governor Whitmer is an insurance company advocate. That's an interesting perspective on purpose. I guess her dad was an executive at Blue Cross Blue Shield. So there's a lot that people don't understand about insurance. I think he's retired now, but
Well, he was the head CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield.
So what really happens, if people don't recognize it, is if you've never been in an injury accident, and a lot of people haven't, it depends on who pays the bill. And oftentimes it's the health insurance company, right? You may have Blue Cross Blue Shield health insurance at General Motors, and you may have Cure Auto Insurance. But if you get hurt in an accident, typically the first payment comes from your health insurance. Am I wrong? Am I right with that, Allan? Or?
Yeah.
So that's why companies like Blue Cross and Blue Shield and HAP and everybody else were interested in the, what do they call it? The change in the insurance laws. I'll just call it a change. I won't call it
no fault.
Yes.
They wanted to put a cap on it. It wasn't going to be.
They did put a cap, right?
Yeah. They wanted
catastrophic.
They didn't want to pay catastrophic. Geez, I want to comment on somebody who's talking about they took the bus to Detroit when they worked in Detroit. They took the bus because they wanted to, save on insurance, and also it has been, when I lived in DC, when people would ask me if I like DC, I'd always say I love the public transportation. There was a great subway system. I lived near two subway systems. I lived one was 0.6 of a mile away, the other was about a mile away, and I usually walked to the one about a mile away. But there was also a bus in front of my house with a great system. You could go on your computer and see when the bus was coming, so you didn't have to wait out there for a half hour. You run out there a few minutes before the bus arrived. You had taxi cabs. Now, I mean, thankfully, the one thing, Ubers and Lyfts have helped to make this a little bit more of a modern city for transportation. If you go to a party, you don't have to drink and drive. You can, or you go to the bar downtown, whatever, you can take an Uber. But still, the public transportation here is still, the Woodward bus is good, but it's so shameless. I mean, some people have to spend so much time on a bus just to get to work. It's crazy. And the idea is that, buses, public transportation is for everybody. It's not just low income, middle, high. It was like in DC, everybody was on the bus. You saw people with suits, you saw working people, whoever. Here, it's almost like, you must be poor if you're taking the bus or whatever. It's like the bus should be for everybody, and we have such an aversion, but we're not set up. I mean, if the buses aren't running, who's going to wait an hour out in the middle of winter? It's 0 degrees out. You're standing at a bus stop. Why would you do that? We haven't set up, and we don't have bus shelters at half the stops, a lot of the stops. So the city is so far behind, and we always feel like it's too late to start now, but it's never too late. I mean, it's a project. It can take, to build the subway in DC, I don't know how many years it took, but to dig underground and they're still adding different lines now. I mean, now they have one out. They've added a line that goes out to, I guess, Dulles Airport, which is way out in Virginia.
Right. Yes, way out.
And so we need to, we need, I mean, just really for the environment, but also for convenience and stuff like that. I love taking public transportation. I took it. I never used my car, or rarely used my car during the week when I was in DC. It sat on the street all during the week. On the weekends for grocery shopping, going to yoga, whatever, I would take my car. But during the week, always took the bus, took the subway, and took cab. If it was late at night, I was at a bar with some friends, I just, jump into a cab and head home.
And Ira but we're the motor city. I think that's why the bus gets a bad rap in Detroit. I think that people have always suggested, I don't know if it's true or not, that the reason Detroit doesn't have mass transportation is because it is the motor city. I'm not sure if that's true or not.
I think that was, I think way back, I think the auto companies wanted the workers to buy their product. And so they sort of dismantled, all the systems and stuff like that. But I think now, I think the auto companies should be obligated to help. There should be some kind of car tax or something to help with public transportation, at least in the city of Detroit. I mean, it's just, and I should say the region, the metro sure. Detroit. I mean, people in Macomb, they don't want to take the bus because the bus service, they say they don't want to take the bus because the bus service is shitty. There's not a good bus service. Like I say, shouldn't have to wait, particularly in the winter, for an hour standing out there. There should be, there are some apps out there for public transportation, but I don't know.
Thank you, Janet. No shelters or benches, which is not very conducive to getting around town. Minneapolis has a fast line. Gula, Geechee, Kenneth Reed. The metro is a shit in the district. You can ride it. It absolutely is. And Minnesota also, up in Minneapolis. Yeah. Chicago, they have the L line.
Portland, Seattle.
Yeah. And I just
New York has a great bus system, actually.
And MR12, Mr. 1213, I think most auto insurance prefers that the health insurance split the bill. I think that's true. Gula Geechee also makes a comment. But before we leave, and I know we're getting ready to leave, I just want to say we were late today. We apologize for what happened last night. We don't forget you guys. The first people we think about is our colleagues out here. And we were late, and we appreciate all the input because it makes the show go better. And I just want to say thanks to everybody that had a comment today. Sorry, Allan. Go ahead.
That's all right. I just want to, as a closing, remind everyone this is a great weekend. I mean, the weather's perfect out there. There's the Jazz Fest on the riverfront, which always has top world-class jazz. There's the Arts, Beats, and Eats, which I'm not as big a fan of. I'm kind of pissed that they moved out of Pontiac, which it would have really helped. It doesn't help the downtown Royal Oak businesses. They're all shut because it's just, or most of them do, because it's just too difficult. But that's out there, and it is a great festival. You have the Hamtramck has a festival all weekend, and they have the Labor Day Parade on Monday. Detroit has the Labor Day Parade, which goes down Michigan Avenue, and I think like last year ended up at the train station. And then Sunday at Easter Market is, I can't remember what they're calling it, but it's Sandwich Day.
Right.
Basically, where a lot of restaurants in Detroit that make sandwiches, including Rocco's Deli on Rocco's Italian Deli on Cass Avenue, which is just great sandwiches. They're going to be out there. They're one of the sponsors. So that's from, I think, 11 to 5 at Easter Market on Sunday. And then, of course, Easter Market on Saturday is always a great place to go. But
and let's not forget what labor meant to this region, right? Labor made this region, and we can't forget that.
Walter Reuther, Jimmy Hoffa, some of the really labor legends, and really, and I worked for the Detroit News for 11 years. I went on strike in 1995. We were the Detroit Newspaper Guild, which included all the reporters and editors, some editors, mostly not editors, photographers, reporters, and the janitorial staff. And then we also had different Teamster unions representing the drivers, the deliverers, the mailers, the guys who stuffed the papers and stuff like that. And we were on strike I was on strike for 19 months. And so I really have great respect. The UAW was incredibly supportive during our strike. We would give the UAW every holiday would give us, I mean, it wasn't a ton, but it was very generous. They gave everyone $150 as a Christmas gift, Thanksgiving gift, Easter gift. And so there is still a labor community here. And, if you go to the Labor Day Parade, you'll see the pipe fitters, you'll see the teachers unions, you see the UAW, the Detroit Newspaper Guild, the reporters are always out there. So it is, I still have a great affinity for the labor movement here in Detroit. So anyways, any other thing you want to say, Jim, before we sign off?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm just glad everybody joined us today. That they made for a great show. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. We'll be back. Our next show is on Wednesday at 8:30, and it'll be the start of the school year for a lot of kids and stuff. And it's sort of a renewal of fall. Is around the corner. I guess September 21st or whatever. And we've got Michigan plays today. University of Michigan plays. The Tigers won last night. They broke their 4-game losing streak. They won 5-3 in Kansas City. And the Lions are just around the corner, which I'm really excited about. I know you are, Jim.
I am. I hope everybody enjoys their Labor Day.
Yeah. All right, everybody. thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you Wednesday.